Hello and welcome to Pickle's Garage. Today we're going to be replacing the AC compressor on my Jeep Grand Cherokee 2002 WJ. I do want to go over a couple things at the top very quickly that are important. One, I'm going to go over the different items that you can look into to see what your issue is specifically, so you're not just replacing a bunch of parts that you don't need to. But also I do want to stress the fact that some backyard repairs are going to be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more complex, a little bit more detail oriented, and this is definitely one of them. I usually put it up with working on your brakes, working on electrical like wires and stuff like that. The AC system is very particular about the environment it needs to operate in, and you just have to be kind of careful so that you're not doing anything that's going to further damage it. And I bring that up because I know there's a lot of different stores that they'll just sell the cans to add Freon, and those can work. There's definitely going to be people out there that say they never had any issues with it, and that's totally true. But a lot of that is just about kind of topping off what you already have if you have a controlled system. So the reason I bring that up is because Freon, which is essentially what is flowing through your AC system, is not a consumable. So it's not something like fuel that's going to go down over time. It should remain in the system and operational the entire time that your AC is functioning. So what you need to look into is if you are just purely getting hot air, you might be out of Freon. And if you're out of Freon, it means that there's a leak somewhere. And so that would be something that you have to find before you can just top it off, right? And so there's a couple different things that you'll need to look into. The other thing is, again, it is something that some states even required you to be licensed to work on. It's something that is very careful. As far as like a process, you just have to be very organized. And I'll show you everything that I do to get mine up and running and working. And you know, for some of you this is just going to be entertainment value. For others, you're going to be interested in trying this yourself. But there's no shame in taking certain steps to have a professional handle certain portions of it. But if you're in a place like I live where it's very hot, it's very expensive to get stuff like this fixed. So I am absolutely motivated to fix this myself, and so I want to show you how you can do it yourself as well. So as mentioned, there's a couple different portions that you're going to want to look into to see what your specific issue is. Now, we'll start off kind of high level stuff of how do you know if you don't have Freon? Well, if you're turning on your AC and you're never getting cold air, it is just always hot, then odds are pretty good that you just don't have any Freon. And so a lot of AC technicians will add a sort of like UV additive to the Freon. And so if there is a leak and you took a UV light over the different AC components, you can actually usually find where the issue is. Now, not everyone's going to do that, especially if it's been recharged and maybe it was recharged by, someone in their backyard and they didn't add it. Then you might not have that luxury. But it is worth checking if you absolutely have zero cold air to take a black light and just try and see on all of the AC hoses and whatnot, just everything that's going to come from essentially your firewall like this, like all these hoses, and then down to your compressor. So checking all those areas and just seeing if you see a leak there, that would be a good point of, starting. Now, I will say, basically anytime I've ever taken a vehicle in to get my AC done, they've always said, oh, your compressor's bad. That's very easy for them to claim that that's going to be the issue, but it's also usually true. They do typically go out first. So I do have another video with my 93 Camaro where it had like a grinding sound and the belt would slip because it would lock up. And so the AC compressor was absolutely the problem here. I don't have those noises with my system, but I'm still heavily leaning towards this being a compressor issue just because I do sometimes have cold air, but not all the time. And it'll take a while to actually cool. And so usually that's going to be more related to, a clutch issue within the compressor, or it's just not living up to its full potential of actually circulating the system. And so that is why I'm leaning towards this being an issue with my compressor in tandem with maybe there not being as much Freon as there should be in the system. And so if you sometimes have cold air, sometimes don't, takes a while, then more than likely the compressor is still going to be the issue. Now, there's multiple parts as it relates to your AC system. You know, there's going to be the fan that's actually blowing it on you. If you don't have any air being blown on you, then that's going to be related to something that's usually inside on the other side of the firewall. That's like a fan motor. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about that because it's not really related to like the Freon cooling system. It's more about related to pushing that cold air on you. So that is a whole nother undertaking that probably requires a lot more disassemble than most people are interested in. And so that's kind of a separate category. But I will say in most cases, your condenser is going to be the one that's at fault. And buying it your own isn't that bad. You can find them at Rock Auto, and they're really not too expensive. I think mine was right around $200. But if I had taken it to a shop, I would have already probably been in the thousands at this point. So you can buy them yourself. You can go to places like Rock Auto, put in your exact vehicle information, and it'll give you your options. Now, it is going to give you a warning that there's a lot of different condensers, even for different even for the same vehicle, there will be different condenser types. A lot of that's related to, you know, engine types or what have you, but you'll usually see some sort of sticker towards the top or the corners that has AC related information. It has, you know, the type of Freon that you can use or coolant, and just different information about your specific model. Mine does not, for whatever reason. So you could, if you were being extra careful, take out the condenser, and there should be a serial tag on that condenser, and that will give you the information you need to pick out the right one. But when I went on Rock Auto, they literally only ever had one model. It was just different companies making the same thing. So I'm very careful, or I'm very safe to assume that perhaps they only did one for this year. So I'm going to go ahead and yank that condenser. The other thing I do want to mention is there is, and let me find it before I talk about it real quick. So it's essentially always going to be in front of the radiator, but there's kind of like a mini radiator right here. And I know sometimes people have like trans coolers and that's a little different, but this is your condenser, not your compressor. And so essentially what this is your Freon is being pumped into this, and then as the air flows through it, that is what's helping cool everything down, and then it's circulating back to you. And so if this is a problem, it's usually more related to there being a hole in the system. So that's why I don't really think this is my problem, because if this was out and it had a massive hole in it, I wouldn't be getting any cold air ever at all, because everything circulates through this, right? So it would just spray out pretty quickly, like probably within a couple days, if not minutes or hours. So again, if you are completely only getting hot air, you're probably going to want to check this as well. And you're going to want to check all your connections on your hoses. So once again, it seems like my primary issue is my condenser. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the disassembly. Okay, to kick us off, safety. Anytime that you think you might be interacting with a refrigerant, it's good to wear gloves. Also glasses, like safety glasses. It's super cold and you don't want frostbite on your eyeballs. So very important to remain safe. Now, if you know that you don't have any refrigerant, then you can pretty much skip this step. But if you do know that you have some level of Freon still in your system, it is good for you to kind of control at what point it is released, because if you try and take off a part where you're disconnecting something, then all that refrigerant could come out at the point where you're not expecting it, right? And so what you're going to see is on this side, there's this little opening right here. And it essentially looks like a bike tire, thing. Now, what you're supposed to do is you're going to be able to take this into a refrigerant specialist, and they're going to be able to hook something up to this, and they're going to be able to safely remove it and, dispose of it properly, because this isn't really great for the environment. And so that is technically what they're going to do, is they have like this fancy machine that hooks up to it. What they're not going to do is they're certainly not going to use a small screwdriver or something and push in on that tab until all the gas is released. They're definitely not going to do that. And while they're not doing that, they're certainly not going to have to worry about not breathing any of this in, because it's very bad for you. So definitely, not advisable to put like a small screwdriver, maybe like a pick or something, while again, not breathing any of this in, because it's very dangerous. Okay, so now we're ready for the removal of the actual condenser itself. Now, I, as you can see, have an aftermarket K&N air filter right here, but I've noticed that having it like this actually makes it really easy to get to different parts down here. I do think if you remove your stock air box, if you have a stock air box, then you'll have the same window that I'm about to show you most of the removal from. So very first step, I'm gonna go ahead and take off my air cleaner here. There's just a screw that holds on the top. It's the same on the OEM one. And then just kind of disconnect this, and then I'm going to go ahead and remove each of these bolts here that's holding this divider here, which again is very similar to the stock air box. So let's go ahead and remove that right now. Alright, so we have our intake removed, which is great. So now we have a better view of our condenser, and that is extremely helpful, and it's also going to give us a path to remove it. The one thing I do want to note is on your new one, sometimes they'll come with a manifold, and sometimes they'll require you to reuse the manifold that you have. So just keep an eye on the one that you have, and see what your need is. The other thing too is they'll normally not sell with O-rings. You'll have to buy that in a separate kit, but it will note it. I do highly recommend replacing your O-rings. So the one I got actually comes with a new manifold and new O-rings. It was the most expensive one, but once you factor in the O-rings and replacing the manifold, it's going to be about the same. So what we're going to do is we are going to remove these at some point, but you'll also notice naturally this is powered by the belt. And so we're going to go ahead and remove the belt real quick just because we're going to need to knock that out anyways. So I'll show you how to remove the belt, and then we'll start working on some of these bolts. So very easy process. All you're going to do is you're going to take a 1/2 inch drive. It's usually the bigger one that will come in your set. And there is a square hole right around here that I'll need 2 hands for it. But basically, I have a little bit of grip on it, but I'm going to push it in all the way. But it's going to be right about there on your tensioner. And once it's in, we're just going to rotate it clockwise. Now I'll take off the tension on the belt, and we're going to be able to remove it. So once again, now it's in there. We just have to rotate this away. So we're taking the tension off, and then if I had a free hand, I just need to grab the belt and pull it off. So I'm going to do that right now. So now that our belt is removed, we're going to go ahead and use a size 10mm socket here. I like these wobble extensions. Basically, they don't fully seat, or they can, but when you want to use them to have a slight angle, they won't fully seat, but they'll still lock in. And so if I was using a straight extension, then I would be running into my fuel line here. And so wobble on a wobble, it's giving me enough of a sort of taper for me to have room. So these are going to be nice and tight, which is good because naturally it's holding in some gases here, but we're going to go ahead and remove these two, get them out of the way, and then we can start on the bolts that are actually holding this unit. There's also going to be a plug towards the top, and I'll show you that in a moment. So another thing with these two removed, I noticed that the one on this side has very nice and clean threads, right? Clean bolts. It's got a little bit of a rusty top, but everything on here is nice and clean. But the one that was on the right here, this has this caked sort of Freon. So this is probably a source of one of my leaks here. Is the O-ring went bad around here, and it is going through the threads. So keep an eye out for stuff like this, because that'll be a problem area that I need to plug when I get the new unit in. And then once again, keep in mind when you're removing these, it is a pressurized system, so when you pop it off, you'll probably get some air, but that's exactly why we had the Freon removed in a controlled way earlier. So that way this isn't just a massive Freon explosion, it's gonna be more like air or whatever. So when it pops off, you get a good view of the O-rings that I was talking about. And so like I said, that one looks pretty good, but you're gonna want to just replace all these because this isn't the one that was leaking. But we'll see if the other one, when I pop it off, if it has any sort of indication that it was leaking. The other thing too is it's good to have kind of a fan nearby if you have one available, just to blow anything that's going to be coming out. Okay, so we got both these hoses off, and we're going to clean around before we reconnect to our new one. but now we have a little bit better view of our plug here. So it does have that sort of classic red tab safety feature. And so basically we're just going to pull this direction, and then that's going to allow us to depress this and get it to disconnect here. So let me grab that real quick. Unfortunately, I need a couple hands. Okay, so here we go. Plug was like that. Just push the red tab that direction. Just use like a screwdriver just to get it started. It doesn't have to go super far, so don't like force it and break it. You just have to get it to the point where this red doesn't show anymore. You can try and push on this side too, but as long as it pops out, you'll be able to press right here and get it disconnected. So now we have the plug disconnected and we have our hoses disconnected. So now all we have to do is start taking out the bolts that are mounting it. So now we have a couple bolts to address. We have that one right there in the light here. Now that is like 15 millimeter, actually works kind of the best, but it's going this direction, and so if you have an extension you can kind of ratchet from here. There's also going to be another bolt right here, right, that my finger's on. That is 9/16. It's kind of like a crossbar that comes out that's holding it, and so we're gonna go ahead and take care of that one here next, and then there should be one more. Okay, so we have that bolt removed. It was pretty tight on mine, so I had something like this. It's just a swivel just to do an offset, and then I was able to crank from out here rather than crank from down there. So might have to get creative on that one. Now the next one I found is actually underneath, which I'll show you real quick. I'm probably going to go ahead and hand tighten that top bolt that I first removed. That way when I remove this bottom one, I don't have to worry about having to hold it and try and figure out a way to pull it down there. So like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and hand tighten the bolt back up there. That way I can remove the bottom one and I can figure out a better way to remove it. Okay, so now up underneath the driver's side, if you look up at it from the bottom, there's a bolt right there. That's gonna be the exact same size as that other bolt that was in the top corner up above. So it's gonna be 15 millimeter, and we're just gonna get that loosened. It doesn't have a nut on the other side, so you don't have to worry about holding anything, but we're gonna go ahead and get that undone right now. All right, so removal. Now, whenever I'm working on stuff like this, I always try and remove as little as possible. There's a lot of things that make it more convenient to remove, but I still would rather struggle for an extra 10 minutes just to not have to remove things sometimes. That's just my own preference. Now, I tried to move it back, but this bar was sort of in the way, the initial mounting bracket. I couldn't get it further or far enough back to move it forward. I was able to move the whole thing forward by twisting it around a little bit, dancing with it, and I got it there, which made me realize probably if I took off this fan trowel, I would have been able to get it out. But what I'm actually going to do is, it's actually pretty easy to remove this power steering pump. And this is a rubberized line, so it'll have plenty of give to move over a little bit. It's just, I think, 3 of these 1/2-inch bolts. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove these, and that will give me, I believe, plenty of room to pull it straight up from there. So one extra removal, but I think this would be the easiest way to get it out from here. And it's out. All right, so you do have to dance with it quite a bit. Just keep in mind, by the way, this bracket is connected to both the pump and what was mounting the AC compressor, so you want to make sure you reline that up once we're putting back in the part. Once again, size 1/2, 13 millimeter I think works as well. You just have to go through the holes with your socket and it comes out. Put that to the side, and then when you get the compressor out, you get the wheel faced up, and then you need to try and angle it so that the manifold is pointed this way, and I'll point to it on the actual old one. You get the manifold pointed this way, and then you're going to be pulling the wheel in this direction out like this, and then there's going to be a mounting point that is going to start hitting this hose. You just have to move the hose in and around it, and then once it gets past that, it'll come up the rest of the way. So that manifold I'm talking about is this. You want to get that in between the hose and the radiator, and then this is that bracket I'm talking about that's going to start hitting the hose. You just have to get the hose around this, keep pulling that wheel at that angle, and it'll come out. So we got the old one out, let's put the new one in. And it's arrived. So this is Denso. This is the brand that I got. And like I said, this was the more expensive one, but it came with the O-rings and it came with the manifold. So let's go ahead and get it out and toss it in. Alright, so now we have our new one next to our old one. We have our new manifold that I was talking about. It does have these sort of shipping plastic bits. I would just leave those on for now. I'll remove them as soon as I'm ready to connect the real hoses, because when you're trying to maneuver everything and get it back installed, you don't want anything falling in. And you also want to try and keep as much moisture out of the system as you can naturally. So the one thing you'll notice is I did flip it on its head. You're going to want to leave it like that for 3 to 4 minutes just to help lubricate around the wheel area. You can give it a few turns as well before we start actually firing it up, but that's just what they advise, just because things get shook around in shipping. The one thing you'll notice is you're going to look at the instructions, and it's going to have a lot of information about, you know, disassembling and putting in a service valve and putting a new gasket or whatever. These sort of packagings, they basically make this with the intention of having it for a lot of different vehicles. And so sometimes they'll have everything you need exactly out of the box, and sometimes you'll need to make a few adjustments. This gasket isn't actually needed in our application if you get the exact same one I do. The gasket's already inside here. There is a step where they mention that you should be draining the oil out of your old one into a sort of measuring cup, and then draining the oil out of the new one, so that way you can put exactly the same amount of oil into your new one that was in the old one. But I'm actually going to kind of skip that step, and the only reason why is just because if mine is leaking anyways, it's not going to have the right oil amount, and odds are they're really just kind of covering their own bases to say that, you know, maybe they checked in the factory, but ultimately you have the responsibility to make sure that it's accurate. So like I said, for me personally, I'm going to go ahead and skip that step. I'm going to trust that there's enough oil in there. I don't need to put the new gasket in because I have everything already in this. If you did need to check it, there is a valve right here. Basically 9/16, you're just going to undo that. Some air will come out for pressurization, and then you can remove that and check that everything's good. But if you got the one that I got, it's already got the gasket you need. It does have the other 2 gaskets that are going to go right there, but like I said, we're going to leave those caps on while we install. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to let it sit for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to go ahead and throw it right back in place where the old one was. And there you go. So the new one is in place. I have all 3 of the bolts loosely connected. I haven't connected this yet. I will say it is very difficult to get the new one back in. I'm not gonna pretend like it's not. I do think if you were really going all out on this, removing the hose right here for your water pump would make it incredibly easy, because that was what I had to fight with the most. But again, you'd have to drain all your radiator fluid, and you know, maybe you want to tie this into a couple jobs, maybe you want to replace this as well if you haven't already. But I would say if this hose wasn't here, it'd be a lot easier. But like I said, it is possible. I didn't disconnect anything. The one thing I did do is those shipping, that like blue and green connection port, I did remove those at different stages to get past something, and then I put them back on. That way nothing got in. So that's an option. You know, definitely getting past that hose, I had to remove both of those in order for it to slide past like the old one did. But like I said, it is absolutely possible, but you do have to fight with it. I would recommend sending it in exactly how you pulled the other one out. So having the manifold kind of this direction, and then that one top bolt bracket, you're just going to get that past this, and then once you get it past and you're deep enough, you can start trying to turn it in. And once you turn it in, you're going to be rotating it a little bit on its way past this hose, and then you'll get it lined up, and then we can reconnect. So I have the bracket lined up on this side of everything, so I'm going to go ahead and start tightening that in. I'll put this back in place with those connections, and I'll finish tightening. Then I'm going to connect that power wire right there, and I'm going to lock the red tab, and then I'm going to connect these 2 pipes as well. Now I know at this point some people are going to say, great, you know, that's awesome, I'm going to go to get, you know, I'm going to go to AutoZone or whatever and get my little can of Freon, and I'm just going to you know, squirt that in and call it a day, but realistically that doesn't work. There is a way for you to pull the vacuum out of the system, pull all the, you know, air, or create a vacuum, I should say, pull all the air out, all the contaminants, and then charge it properly. There are really great videos out there of showing in depth how to do it. I'm going to show you what I'm doing by following a lot of those steps, but I will say that is the more complicated, more careful process that you need to follow. And so at this point, if you wanted to just run this to the shop, you already saved yourself probably about $1,000, depending on where you live, with just this installation piece of it. And so I would say if you ran it to your local shop and just said, hey, can you do a flush and recharge of my Freon, you know, they're probably not going to be the wiser that you installed this yourself, and so I'm sure they would be fine to do it. But I will say the other side of that is they're probably going to want to do a leak down test, which is in your best interest if there is a leak in your process. So you can absolutely do that. I don't think anyone would really have an issue with charging it if you had installed this yourself, but maybe just don't mention it. Not that, again, it's going to be an issue, but they're going to want to make more money on doing it themselves, right? And so I think if you just said, hey, can I get a flush and a recharge, and can you check for leaks, I'm sure they would be fine to go ahead and do that for you, and you're going to end up saving money, right? But if you do want to do it yourself, everything that I'm going to use you can get on Amazon. You can find it in many different stores, so you're free to follow along. But if there's anyone that wanted to leave right now just because they really just wanted to do this install and then go to your shop and get it recharged, that totally works. But if you are interested in doing the entirety of this process, stick around. Also, real quick, let me show you how to put the belt back on. So it's going to go up around the alternator, under the tensioner, back up around your power steering, down under your new AC, up around. It's going to form an S down here in the middle, right? And then it's going to go down under your crankshaft, then up back to the tensioner and to your alternator. Also, if you are at this point going to take this to a shop, just take it right away. Don't drive on it too much without any of the Freon in there. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to charge it yourself, and you can make a decision if you want to do it yourself as well. But like I said, I got the kit on Amazon. I put the new O-rings on those black ones that came in the kit, and then just made sure everything was clean. Reattached this. I'm going to put my air intake back on, but let me show you how to charge your system after you clean it of contaminants. Alright, so now that we've installed our compressor, we're going to go ahead and safely vacuum the system as well as add our refrigerant. So what you're going to need for that is you're going to be able to find these online. They're about $200 on Amazon. It's called Extreme Power, and it's a vacuum pump. This is a 1/4 horsepower, I believe, and like I said, you can find them on Amazon. The other thing you can find is this. It's UV dye. And so I had mentioned earlier, if you have this as an additive, it's not required, but it does make finding leaks a little easier down the road if you use a black light to see this kind of spraying out. So definitely worth the investment. Also mentioned, this is definitely an irritant. So wearing gloves anytime you might come into contact with it, or safety glasses, is highly recommended. You don't want to burn yourself. You definitely don't want to get this in your eyes because it is very dangerous. We're also going to need R134A refrigerant. You can find this at your local auto parts store. You're going to want the can that looks like this. Any brand really works, but you just want to make sure it doesn't have any of the additives in it, because our new compressor, if you got the same one that I did or a similar one, already has oil in it. So you don't want stop leak or anything like that. You just want these. You're going to need 2. So luckily for us, the capacity for our system is 24 fluid ounces, and so there's 212, so we're going to be able to use both of these cans till they're empty, and that will be the maximum, and so therefore we won't have to weigh it. If you had less, like say you had to do a 22, you're actually going to have to buy a scale to weigh it. But luckily for us, if you get 212s, then you will be fine. It is dangerous to overfill these systems, and naturally if you have too little in the system, then it's not going to work properly. So it is important to make sure that we're doing that measurement properly. The other thing is vacuum oil that will come with the kit that you buy. You're gonna see a little sight glass right here, which isn't really coming through. All you have to do is when you buy it, you're gonna unscrew this. You're gonna fill the oil to the sight line. You're gonna wanna make sure that you don't overfill it, so you're not gonna use the whole bottle. It does take a little while to level out, so pour slowly. And then we're also going to run this system just so it levels out and we make sure that it's the proper level. And then you're also going to want to make sure to take this off before you go ahead and run it. But like I said, we're gonna plug this in. We're gonna run it for a couple minutes just to make sure all the lubrication works properly. And then I'll show you the proper process to go ahead and vacuum our system. And one more potential item that you may need is this adapter. Essentially, all cans that are found in most of these local auto parts stores are these self-sealing cans, but the charge tube here is for like a piercing version. So essentially, it's supposed to just go down, make a hole in the can, and then when you lift up, it actually lets it flow. But most of what you're gonna find in store is these self-sealing, so you need this adapter in order to use this version. It's essentially the same process, just you're gonna have this all the way down when you connect it to this, and you'll put this on the can first, and then you'll have this all the way in the down position, and then you'll go ahead and screw it onto the adapter, and then it'll work the exact same way. But if you got the extreme power with an X that I got, then this is what you'll need as well, also found on Amazon. Okay, so we've ran it and our oil level is fine, so I connected, hand tightened only, you don't have to do anything too crazy, the yellow line on this. That comes up to our gauge here, and then we're gonna have these two in the off position, and then we're going to take our blue low pressure, and luckily for us, Jeep put this right next to each other. Sometimes you have to go a little further, but basically we're just gonna undo this. And these are different sizes, so you don't have to worry about getting them mixed up, but we're just going to pull back on this, place it over, let it close, and then we're going to do the same thing with the red one on this one. All right, don't forget your gloves. Like I said, just gonna pull that back, press it on, and it locks in place. All right, so now both are locked in place, and we're gonna go ahead and turn these to the open position. Okay, so we have our high connected and our low connected, and we are gonna go ahead and turn on the pump. So what this is doing is essentially this is confirming that we don't have a leak in our system. And so we're gonna go ahead and turn on the pump. And then once we've turned it on, we're gonna go ahead and open these up, and then we're gonna confirm that we have a vacuum. So I'll show you that here in a moment. Okay, so as you can see, the gauges are starting to move down. We're gonna want them both to get to the 30 mark. And then we're gonna go ahead and turn off our vacuum, but pulling out all the contaminants and making sure that we have a clean system here. So we're gonna give it a few more minutes until it gets all the way to that 30 mark, and then I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the vacuum. Okay, now that we gotten nice and close to 30, this honestly could be just a margin of error at that point, but we're gonna go ahead and turn off the pump, and we're going to, well, first you're gonna go ahead and close these off and then turn off the pump, but we're gonna let it sit here for about 30 minutes and just make sure that the needles don't move, and then we know that we don't have any leaks in our system. So we'll come back to this in 30 minutes. Okay, 30 minutes later, and the needles have not moved, which is great because that means that there is no leak in our system any longer, which is awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and once again turn on our pump, and then we're going to open back up these knobs here, and then we're actually going to run it for about 45 minutes, and that should completely pull out any sort of moisture or air that's left in the system, and then we can go on and move on to the next step. But this is a very important one to let it run for a while, just because any sort of liquid, like water, moisture, anything in the system is just going to damage it and create leaks that we just got rid of. So let's go ahead and run it, and then I'll see you in another 45. Okay, so now it's been 45 minutes and it's still holding, so we're gonna go ahead and close off the high and the low knobs, and then we're going to shut off our vacuum, and then we're going to disconnect the hose from there, and we will start charging our AC. Alright, so we're just about ready to add our refrigerant, but first we're going to go ahead and use some UV dye. So like I said, this is great for finding leaks later on in the system, so definitely worth buying. All you have to do is, this has kind of a double connection right now, and so you just kind of have to fill up just a little bit in the cap and then screw this back into it, and then that will be plenty. So we'll go ahead and set that aside. And now the next part is going to be that adapter that I mentioned earlier. So you'll see it'll say self-sealing valve. I think this is a majority of the cans these days. So I would just go ahead and buy this. You can also get different versions of this that have the self-sealing version. But if you notice that yours has that extreme point, then this is a pierce version. And so the reason why it's so different is because this is supposed to pierce the can, and with it all the way in the down position, it's actually locking any flow from going out. And so when you undo this, then it opens up this to allow everything to go through. But the issue with the self-sealing is you've lifted this, so now this is open, but then now there's no pressure to open the can itself. So that's why you need the adapter, or you need a different version of this. But this is the one that comes with the pack. So we're gonna go ahead and shake this up per the instructions. We'll put this on, right? And then with this all the way in the down position, we're going to connect it here. But I'll connect it to this first, but I'll show you the setup here in a moment. I'm gonna go ahead and shake this. Okay, so don't forget your gloves while you're doing all this, but again, we're gonna go ahead and put the blue on first. This is already gonna be connected to our hose. We're gonna have this in the down position. We're going to screw it onto this, and then we'll go ahead and open this back up, okay? So now we have Freon in our tube, but we also have air in it, right? Because there was air in all this system. And so what you need to do is, there's a valve right here. You're gonna go ahead and unscrew this bit to it, and then similar to a bicycle pump, we're just going to go ahead and depress it until we only see our Freon here. So let me try and do this one-handed. But again, just make sure you're not breathing any of that in. But you see how that was all Freon, no air. You might get a couple drops of your dye out, but that's fine. We put plenty in there. So now this is purged, and we're gonna go ahead on to our next step. So remember, all of this is still closed. We're gonna go ahead and move our Freon to a cool part of the engine bay. It only has to get to 125 degrees before it actually could explode, or it burst, I should say. That's a better word for it. And so you don't want it on anything that's gonna be hot in your engine bay, because that doesn't take very long to get to 125. So just put it somewhere off to the side. And now we're gonna go ahead and start the vehicle, and we're going to turn on the AC, and we're gonna put it to maximum cool, maximum airflow. So car's running, maximum air, maximum cool, AC on. And then with it running, we're gonna come back to our low, and we're gonna slowly open this. So you'll see the gauge will go up, and you'll start to see your low is starting to rise as well. Kind of open it slowly, you don't have to throw too much at it, but it'll settle here in a minute. And you can see in the sight glass you have Freon going in, but now that it's steady, we'll open it all the way, and then we're gonna let it sit for a couple minutes until we stop seeing anything come in. And then you can give it a little bit of a shake every once in a while, just to keep it going, but eventually that'll empty. And then we're gonna close this back on, and we're gonna switch cans, and we're gonna do the same process. All right, can almost seemed empty, but like I said, shake it a little bit, turn it upside down, and you can see that now there's more. So it's just about empty. Can is gonna be very cold to the touch, so keep that in mind. But that's why you can't put it on anything hot, because the drastic change will cause it to burst. But again, we're only opening the low side. Don't touch the high side, that'll stay nice and closed. So looks like we're just about done on this one, so let's go ahead and switch cans. We're leaving it running, but we're gonna go ahead and close this now. Fully tight, and let's grab our other can. Once again, same process. Put the blue thing on the can here, have this all the way in the down position, screw it on, likely some is going to come out a little bit, so just hold it away from yourself. And then once it's pierced, then you're going to go ahead and open this up. And then once again, just for safety, we're going to purge the line again. So I'll take a screwdriver and press that in. Maybe I'll get better with one hand still. Yeah, man. There we go. So now that it's purged again, we're gonna go ahead and unscrew this slowly, and then we'll empty that out, and then I'll show you the last step. All right, so it looks like our second can is empty. So we're gonna go ahead and close this back up all the way. This stayed closed the whole time. That's closed, and then we're gonna go ahead and close our high side here. And close our low side. And then now we can disconnect everything similar to how we took them off. And we'll put our caps back on. And we are good to go. So let's check how the AC is running. Alright, getting colder by the second, so we are good to go. So you should notice an immediate difference. But we're good to go ahead and wrap up. So thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.